When you think of Greenland, you probably picture a vast frozen island. Icebergs, right? Well, what if I told you that same island is now the epicenter of a potential trade war between America and Europe? Seriously. So how on earth did that happen? We're going to dive right in because this whole fight over Greenland, it signals a massive shift in global power. Okay, so it really all boils down to this: a direct warning, reportedly from Donald Trump. The message to his European partners was, well, pretty unambiguous. Resistance could carry economic consequences. In other words, getting in the way up in the Arctic could get very, very expensive. And that, right there, is the new fall line we're looking at today. It's drawn right across the North Atlantic.
All right, Section 1, Greenland's strategic rise. So you gotta ask, how did this place, this icy periphery, suddenly become a geopolitical center? What makes it so darn valuable all of a sudden?
You see, Greenland's value is, well, it's multi-layered. First off, just look at a map. Geographically, it's a vital hub for Arctic security, and it's a key post for missile defense. But the real game changer, the thing that's really driving all this tension, is what's buried under all that ice. We're talking about huge, untapped reserves of rare earths and critical minerals. Now, think of these as the essential vitamins for modern technology, right? They're the secret ingredients for literally everything from our phones to electric cars. And here's the kicker. With China currently controlling most of the world's supply, Greenland suddenly looks like an absolutely non-negotiable strategic asset for the West.
So yeah, that really begs the question, right? Why are these resources so critical right now? I mean, they've always been there, buried under the ice, so what's changed?
Well, these aren't just any old rocks. We're talking about the absolute essential building blocks for our entire green energy transition. Think electric vehicles, massive wind turbines, all that advanced manufacturing. For policymakers in the US, controlling access to this stuff is all about securing Western supply chains and really future-proofing their economies against their biggest geopolitical rivals.
Okay, so that's the US position, loud and clear. But how is Europe reacting to all this pressure? Let's get into Section 2, Europe's firm response. And this is where you really start to see a clash of principles and of power.
And this really shows you the fundamental disconnect. You've got the US position on one side, which is all about leverage and what we call transactional diplomacy. But on the other side, you have Europe, and they're talking about sovereignty and alliance-based norms. It's like they're playing two completely different games with two different rulebooks.
So, publicly, you'll hear European leaders talking about principles and international law. But what the source material tells us is that behind closed doors, the conversation is very different. The concern is deeply, deeply economic. The real fear? It's that these threats of tariffs, even if they're just talk, could totally spook investors. They could destabilize some really sensitive economic sectors and just throw transatlantic pricing into chaos. So while the public face is all principled defiance, the private reality is a very high-stakes economic calculation. And look, this whole Greenland episode, it signals something much, much bigger, which brings us right to Section 3, a new diplomatic playbook. We're talking about redefining the entire rules of the game for Western allies. Okay. The key term you absolutely have to understand here is transactional diplomacy. What is it? Well, it's a foreign policy where nothing, and I mean nothing, is taken for granted. All those historical friendships, decades of alignment, they no longer guarantee support. Instead, every single issue becomes a negotiation, and the main currency in that negotiation? Leverage. This quote from the source material just crystallizes the whole shift perfectly. It says, strategic alignment is no longer assumed, it is negotiated. Let that sink in for a second. It is a massive departure from decades of foreign policy. It fundamentally changes how the entire transatlantic relationship works.
And naturally, an approach like this puts immense pressure on the very institutions that have held the Western alliance together for generations, right? We're talking about the European Union and NATO. Both of them are now being forced to navigate this brand new reality, a reality where their unity is constantly being tested against the national interests of their own members. The old playbook, it's been thrown right out the window. So, where does all this leave us? What happens now? Let's jump into our final section, the Arctic front line. What are the concrete things we should all be watching for as this whole situation unfolds? Well, in the immediate future, you can expect to see three key things happen. First, you're going to see a flurry of behind-the-scenes diplomatic activity. European leaders will be scrambling to de-escalate all this tension. Second, you can bet that financial markets and global execs will be monitoring every single signal coming out of Washington very, very closely. And third, and this is maybe the most important part,
US allies are going to be forced into a major strategic reevaluation of their own positions. They have to.
And really, this is the ultimate takeaway. An issue that was once considered kinda peripheral, you know? The geopolitics of the Arctic, well, it's now front and center. As a source material puts it, it has moved to the center of international economic strategy. So no, Greenland isn't just some remote island anymore. It's a frontline issue in US-European relations.
And that leaves us with one final crucial question to really think about. This whole confrontation over Greenland, is it just a unique one-off event? A weird blip? Or is it the first of many new fault lines that we're about to see crack open between old allies? Honestly, the answer to that question is probably going to define the next era of global politics.